Quick note before we begin. We recorded this the day before the promotion for this new series, which will explain some of the opinions in this podcast. Also, there are a few sound issues here, particularly with Emma's audio, as this was being recorded on a brand new computer. We will try not to repeat this in time for the next pod. Enjoy the show. I'm Shane Thomas and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Chris Coker and Emma Foster, and we are here to preview the upcoming new series of Doctor Who. So if you have any thoughts on our upcoming thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. Emma, so if we just start with the new series, which from the time of us doing this podcast will be with us in, I think, 3 weeks. From this new series, what from it are you looking forward to the most?
I'm looking forward to it feels like it's been a long time. I mean, it hasn't been, like, especially in terms of gaps we've had before between series, especially after the end of last series, which for me was a bit disappointing, a little bit of a letdown. I just want to see them kind of getting back into high gear with a new companion, see where it's going, and just sort of get started. Because Joyce the Well was okay, but I'm just sort of looking forward to them getting going and seeing where sort of getting me back a little bit, because I'm a little bit, not out, but a little bit just kind of, I think this is the least I've been looking forward to a series kind of ever. It sounds awful to say, but this is sort of the least kind of excited I've been, I think, in maybe the whole time the show's been on. I'm just looking forward to sort of getting started.
Alright, Chris, if I come to you with the same question.
I agree with a lot of what Emma says. I would say I am looking forward to seeing how this new companion, Belinda, works out. They keep saying she doesn't want to be on the TARDIS, she just wants to go home. I mean, that's the kind of dynamic that we haven't really seen in the new series. I mean, you have to go back to Tegan Jabanka in the early 80s to have a character like that. And it seems like they're going to try to explain some sort of connection with Mundy Flynn, who we saw in Boom, if that is an interesting connection or whether that turns out to be something that doesn't really pan out. And I'm excited to see the return of Unit and whether they'll set up the spin-off series, The War Between the Land and the Sea, which will come out next fall or this fall or next year.
I think that's very likely. In some ways, however this series kind of ends, you would imagine it'll be like a potential soft launch for The War Between the Land and the Sea, which I think is to be probably expected towards the back end of this year. And I was going to save stuff for Belinda because you brought it up already. This dynamic is, on paper at least, from what we're seeing, appears to be a very different one. What we're used to seeing is the Doctor shows up in someone's life whose life isn't going great, and the Doctor takes companion from a purposeless life to a purposeful one. And that may not be the case here. I mean, it may be the case here, but that's not the trope that we're getting here. This isn't, oh, my life's shit. Oh, you're asking me to go travel with you. Okay, let's go. How it goes, that's what we're used to seeing. But Russell does appear to be giving us something different. Just the dynamic is different, so that does, from the perspective of us as audience members, that gives us something different to engage with, and also gives you different things to do in terms of the story you're going to tell and how you're going to tell that story as well. It also means that Belinda then may not be a straight replacement for Ruby. She's not coming to TARDIS in the same circumstances or similar circumstances Ruby did, which is usually what happens. Rose goes in the TARDIS for these reasons, then Martha goes in for similar reasons, then Donna goes in for similar reasons, and she's not being a pick-me girl in any way of, can I be your friend as well, Doctor? She's like, no, can you take me to fuck home? I don't want to be here.
It seems from the preview that we've gotten so far that he almost has to like talk her into sticking around, talk her into having adventures. There's that one line where he says something like, well, now we're having fun. It's almost like he has to convince her every week to stick around even though she wants to go home.
It's almost like, I'm sure Emma may be in this situation, I'm sure most people have, it's like, I need to go home. I'll have one more drink. Stay for one more drink. And you're like, alright, I'll have one more drink. This might be a way of Russell trying to slightly make make amends or not replicate the mistakes he made writing Martha following Rose. I don't know if everyone agrees, but the general consensus is the fault not being Freema Agyeman's, but mistakes were made in how that character was given to us and how they were put together. I think actually a lot of Russell's writing, if you look at it on a macro level with Doctor Who, is obviously he got a lot right, but he got some things wrong, and I think he sees in some ways this second go round as a second chance to be like, okay, well, the things I got wrong, I don't want to do those things again. And that's definitely something I think worth keeping an eye on when we see Belinda week after week and how she's written how her relationship with the Doctor developed.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how he pulls this off. He's really been walking a fine line between this getting annoying and being interesting, if you see what I mean. Because as Chris mentioned, the Tegan and Doctor 5 dynamic, because there was loads of them in that TARDIS, they didn't have time to argue all the time, which is basically what they did every time they put their mouth at each other. But then you'd have Nyssa and Adric, they have to argue with the Doctor as well, separately, to kind of keep the plot moving. It's going to be interesting to see how he makes it work. So, okay, they're a bit more combative, because I think a lot of the criticism between him and Ruby was they were entirely too jolly. She didn't challenge him at all. They didn't have like a Donna and Doctor moment like in The Fires of Pompeii.
You can't just leave them!
Don't you think I've done enough? History's back in place and everyone dies.
You've got to go back! Doctor, I'm telling you, take this thing back!
Because they were good mates, but then they still butted heads a little bit on the morals of what they were doing. So that worked really well. Making this dynamic work is going to be really tough, and he hasn't got a lot of time to do it in, because we're going to have obviously a start episode. We presume that these last two episodes are going to be a two-parter, wrapping up whatever overarching narrative we've got. So they've only really got 6 to sort of get her to the point where, half the fan base doesn't want to drop kick her out into deep space. So
that's true, even though I think that's probably the case with every incarnation of the show, though. So if you think of the companion Doctor relationship that worked, usually if they don't work by episode 6, do they work after that? Usually the ones that work, by episode 6, you enjoy watching them. I mean, obviously, you two can obviously go a lot further back than me, but whether it's the Doctor and Amy, the Doctor and Rose, the Doctor and Donna, if we didn't have it right by 6, then we didn't have it right. It's definitely true that we're assuming, we could be wrong, we're perfectly open to be proven mistaken on this, but the expectations are there is going to be some, not like hatred between them, but a bit of like awkwardness. Maybe this Doctor, because if you think of the Doctor's relationship with, I'm blanking on her name now, from Joy to the World, the Steph the Wally character. Anita, of course it's Anita, yeah.
Anita.
If you think of the relationship between the Doctor and Amy, Doctor and Ruby, and the Doctor and Anita, the Doctor needs to make friends very easily. And just thinks I can just be very charming and flash a smile, and then they want to hang out. And then if he comes along someone that is not as immediately enamored with him, that gives you something interesting to work with. That's what we imagine we get early on. Obviously, that has to develop and mature. You can't be having it every week, because, to your point, Emma, it's not even that in of itself is a bad idea for a story. It just wouldn't be entertaining if you're getting the exact same thing every week. Maybe there's still, like Donna and Doctor, that the companion is willing to take the Doctor down a peg or two and isn't going to fluff the Doctor's ego. But they're aligned.
I think one thing that will definitely help develop that relationship this time around is that we have Ncuti Gatwa available for the whole season. So there were a couple of episodes last season, 73 yards. He wasn't really there. And that was one of the criticisms that people had, was that there seemed to be at least 2 episodes.
Dot Bubble.
Got and Bubble, where, you didn't really see much of him or him and Ruby together. So really, they had an even shorter time together than what the Doctor and Belinda should have in this season. So I think that would help.
I actually imagine, just because a little bit of time has passed, in hindsight, we'll look back at that first series and be like, and I imagine Russell and the people who work on it will be more candid about do you have any idea how tough that was to actually put a brand new series with a brand new Doctor, and we didn't have the Doctor for for X amount of time, and we almost said to this companion who's almost a child, hey, you got to carry this. I think in hindsight we'll look back, if Russell ever speaks on it, or even if Ncuti speaks on it, or Millie Gibson speaks on it, of that was actually probably more difficult than they realised until it happened. But that, I think, is a conversation for another day. So as far as what I'm looking forward to the most is the tone of the series, and specifically I only thought this when I saw the trailer. Because if you look at the trailer for this series and you look at the trailer for the last series, they are really, really different. The tone around some year ago, it was very sunny, it was very bouncy, it was very peppy, it was like an upbeat pop song. Here's your new doctor. Isn't this all such fun? And this trailer, and trailers are very much like mood boards. The mood of this has a sharper edge to it. The colours they're using are darker. I mean, literally darker. And if you listen to like Ncuti's voice in the bits we're getting to hear from him, his vocal register is also lower. It's a lot more grave. It's a lot more serious. The mood is that of a greater peril coming. And that almost like the fun and games are slightly over. Because I wasn't as low on this, I think, as Emma was coming in. But I wasn't at a high place. And I'll be honest with you, my mood lifted when I saw this trailer. Because I think Russell, in general, is at his best when he goes to this area and he goes to this place. I know if you see him in interviews, and particularly on TV, his public persona is very bouncy enthusiasm. But if you look at his work, I find his work a lot more effective when he writes situations where things become too dangerous to be fun. So in the world of Doctor Who, I know he didn't write Dalek, but you think an episode like Dalek or Midnight or The Parting of the Ways, and then you think of what he did when he started writing for Torchwood, for Children of Earth, and then even think about It's a Sin started and how It's a Sin ended. That's when he's really cooking as a writer. And I hope that the promise of that trailer, and I know he's not cutting the trailer together, a trailer can only give you so much, but I hope that's what we're getting, because that's when I think he works at his best. But I think this trailer might be the best trailer I've seen for the show since the 50th anniversary. You could say maybe the 60th. The 60th was quite good. But I'm talking just as a trailer. This does not mean the show will be as good as a trailer. But I thought this trailer was brilliantly cut together. Brilliantly put together. It did what a trailer's meant to do, which is to increase your levels of enthusiasm for what's to come. And I looked at the trailer and was just like, if this is promising, this is very encouraging. But Russell's mentioned we're not into full promo stage yet. So there'll be stuff we say and questions we have that'll probably be answered in the promotional tour. Well, shall we transition them into, because our next thing we'll talk about is what is concerning you the most.
Like I say, I mean, I thought the trailer was okay, but I think that with the expectation of this Disney deal, I really thought there would be like another level to the promotion. The most egregious thing to me, here in the UK, this Friday just gone was Red Nose Day, which is a big charity telethon.
Oh, sorry, has that already happened? I thought that happened yet.
Yeah, it's Sunday.
Okay, I totally missed that. Sorry, go on.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Because it alternates years with another big telethon called Children in Need, right? Which is basically the same thing. It usually has like loads of big comedy sketches from comedians, sports people, TV presenters, and usually, especially when there's a series coming on, Doctor Who does something. And I thought, there's got to be something. Give me anything to go on Red Nose Day, because they had a whole big thing of like right at the end where they sang "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life," and they had like people like Morgan Freeman on this bloody thing, and I was like, you couldn't wheel out a couple of them out of this show to do that bit. You couldn't put together a clip. One of the presenters, because you usually have a load of presenters on it. One of the presenters was Rylan, who's in the damn show this year. I mean, still a song contest. I was like, you couldn't be bothered to do anything with that. But that shit is egregious. So I literally turned around to my husband and said, apart from we had a nice set for Boom and a really inconvenient start time for the people in the UK last year, what's Disney done for us? I sound like them from bloody
for Brian.
Monty Python. They've done for us. Because this is why I didn't like the Disney deal from Jump Street. It just feels like Doctor Who is just another piece of IP that they just hoovered up because we want all the IP. Because one of these things has got to make money one of these days, right? And what good is it doing when we've got these huge, these things that we used to always do, and we're not doing them? We're not doing these obvious things. I mean, yeah, we've got these nice trailers, and yeah, we've got these little teaser things with different, like the Eiffel Tower and a taxi floating through space. It's too vague. We're in the position now with Doctor Who is we can't rely on people just tuning in just because Doctor Who's on. It's not happening anymore. The last 5-6 years of Doctor Who has shown that you're going to have to drag people in. You're going to have to saturation bomb them. You're going to have to make people sick of it until the show comes on. So I think the most egregious thing that happened, right, is over here, the trailer leaked early. this has happened in other years, right? That the trailer leaked early, and then the BBC had to go, oh shit, okay, well, we'll put it out now. Everyone's seen it, blah, blah, blah. It would have blown up, like, massive. Even in the Chibnall days. But I think the fact that it got leaked, and it was all over Twitter, and the fact that the BBC just went, okay, whatever. Didn't even acknowledge it, didn't have to. It generated so little buzz outside of Doctor Who land that they just ignored it, and then they released the trailer on the day they were going to anyway. And I was like, oh, we are fucking cooked. If that is how things are now, that you don't have to bother to worry about a leak. It's so inconsequential, it doesn't move the needle that we're not even going to bother acknowledging it or doing anything about it. We'll just put out the trailer we're meant to anyway, because who cares? I mean, can you imagine that happening at any other point in the series run ever since he's been back? I can't.
Chibnall was so scared of leaks that he was too secretive about stuff. So, yeah, I agree with you.
That's actually something he did very well. That was probably the best thing, is he ran a very, very tight ship. Yeah, with that, because Chris, you wouldn't have seen it. It wasn't the leak, it was more how it was done. It was clearly a fuck-up. It was an individual fuck-up by someone. It is important just to state everything we're saying, because we've got to get further into this in our next topic, but everything we're saying, maybe not rendered moot, but like we could be a few days away from the time of this recording. By the time this podcast is out, we may have actually had something of, not a promotional blitz, but some tangible conversation out there rather than just little bits dropping on social here and there. We're talking about the information we have right now.
What worries me is I just feel like everyone's kind of quiet quit, if you see what I mean. Like, obviously, it just feels like everyone's kind of moved on. Remember, they filmed this series like 18 months ago. And so since then, obviously, everyone's had to find work and keep working. I understand that. So, Russell's moved on. He's writing something else. He's got another thing cooking. He's got a big movie about to drop with Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman. The way that, especially that Disney's gone in the past, since Doctor Who's been signed up with them as well, is concerning. I mean, it's the last time they had a hit with anything. I mean, because the MCU is dying on its arse.
The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian.
Okay, The Mandalorian. The original movies are here. Because I saw a thing about, because obviously Severance was dropped season 2, right? Massive show. And then I saw an article that said Apple TV loses some ridiculous millions of dollars.
Yeah, no, they all do. I mean, that's actually going to be in our next segment. I've got a lot to say on that. But yes, no, you are right about that. The only one that makes money is Netflix. None of the others do.
They can do it because they have a gigantic conglomerate that flogs stuff, $1,000 smartphones to people that people buy every 2 years. So they can afford to put all this money into a loss leader. So if you, Chris, like go for Costco, the fact that, you get a rotisserie chicken in there for $5, it's a loss leader, as they call it in these things. Those prices never change, so they get you in the door and you can buy a whole bunch of other stuff at Costco instead. It's a bit like that. Here is our benevolence from your gods at Apple. Some telly to watch on your smartphone, which will cost you £1,000.
Chris, we haven't actually got into what was concerning you coming into this new series, or was it the same thing as Emma?
I actually wrote down 2 things that really concerned me, and one of it is you were talking earlier about the trailer and how good the trailer is. I always say, if you can't make a great-looking 2-minute trailer for almost any TV show, you've probably done it wrong. And the other thing I worry about is, will the end of the series live up to the hype that we get for the beginning of the series? I mean, most of us agree that, Sutek was a little disappointing. The revelations about Ruby's parents were a little disappointing in their way after the build-up that we had gotten the rest of the season. Will this season live up to the hype that we get out of it? I don't know. I mean, I try to be optimistic about these things, but I guess time will tell, as they say. Will all the plot strands come together in a satisfying way by the end of the season, or will we come back at the end of the season and say, well, we didn't really like that, or that really didn't tie up very well, or that kind of thing?
Well, that reminds me actually of the other concern that I've got, if I haven't got enough. The fact that we're sort of yet another mystery box plot. We're doing here's another mysterious person, and we don't know what's happening. It's like, bruv, we've done that. I think I said last year, when we were talking about last season, is it felt a bit like Russell was playing the hits, and I feel this is like Greatest Hits Part 2.
And arguably, Moffat was also playing the hits on the scripts he wrote last year as well. You can check the checklist of Moffat's little obsessions on that. And as someone who likes those most of the time, I appreciated that. But on the other hand, there was a sense of, we've kind of already done this.
It is slightly linked to the thing that concerned me the most. There's nothing specifically that I have an idea of that will happen. It's something I'm just noticing in TV, and I'm worried Doctor will get drawn into it. It is a couple of things in particular, I think I have questions around them, unresolved questions so far, and I particularly think of like Mrs. Flood and to a lesser extent Ruby. We get the episodes week by week. I'm just kind of hoping the discourse isn't swamped by conversations and more specifically predictions about Mrs. Flood, about Belinda, about Ruby, and what part they'll play in the overall arc. This isn't a Doctor Who specific issue, it's a general TV issue, where I'm noticing ongoing series are kind of being, I think, weighed down by fan theory and speculation, basically things that have nothing to do with the actual story.
You know what, that's true, because I've got a 4-year-old, and I watch a lot of Bluey. I get recommended old fans of Bluey pages, and they novel that they have invented about Bluey. I'm like, where the fuck are you getting any of this? The plane rise infected everyone.
In fact, if you were saying wait till Disney Plus hit, that's probably it.
Yeah.
Because Bluey's on Disney Plus, isn't it?
It is.
For us.
Bluey's everywhere, mate.
Yeah, for us at least. I've listened to a podcast about this.
A man can only have so many shows that are entirely premised on like the mystery.
Yeah, I'm ready for this talk. Let's do this.
And the creeping, crawling, like inch by inch, like we didn't know this about that guy.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I sometimes forget, because you and I love these kinds of shows generally. We love chatting about like, oh, what do you think's going to happen here? And what do you think that meant? And stuff like that. And historically, like, we wanted to know who killed Laura Palmer, and we wanted these crazy kids to get off that island.
And then
all that
get back.
stuff. Yeah. I wanted to know what method of torture Jack Bauer would use that broke the Geneva Convention. That was my mystery box. But
I felt like there was a little callback to 24 and 0 Day, but we'll get there.
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting to watch multiple shows at the same time and realize that there's really the part of your brain that it's mostly engaging is guessing and trying to keep up with or get ahead of the plot. And I'm not sure it's my favorite way to watch TV. It's certainly not the only way I like watching TV. Do you understand what I'm saying, though? When you
so I think that there's been a movement. I mean, there's a word for this kind of thing now that you hear in a lot of different fields, and it's gamify, right? Like, how can we gamify this experience? How can we make, and you hear it a lot like in the people who work in these larger companies when they're trying to develop their IP for amusement parks or even for theatrical events. It's like, how can we draw the viewer or the audience member or the customer in?
Well, apparently
in a way that
it's
is
Basement
stickier.
Jackson espresso martinis is how you.
That's all I need. And for me, to be clear, it was watching the people drink the espresso martinis. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. I like to have my espressos before it and my martinis after it, and then the theater in the middle. But I do think it is potentially, okay, whether I like it or not aesthetically or artistically is one thing, but it does seem to be, there does seem to be some intentionality behind it in terms of how do we stand out? How do we get people to pay attention? How do we get people to put down their phones or make having their phones part of the experience because they're cross-referencing things and looking things up on Reddit or asking questions? Like, these are all artillery in the war against the entropy of our attention.
Just stop that now, because my loose theory on this is too many fans in TV, again, not just Doctor Who, but obviously includes Doctor Who, are trying to be the smartest fan in the room and acting like they're the number one best true fan because they told you 3 weeks in advance who the Rani was. I'm really just hoping Doctor Who can escape that, and obviously there will be theories and stuff. That's a normal part of being a fan. But I don't want that to be the primary thing we're talking about. At minute 32 of the Caves of Androzani, if you pause it there, you'll notice there's a symbol on that cave. And that means that, just stop. I have no interest in that. And actually, I find it incredibly tedious. I don't think it's very clever. It has nothing to do with the story. It has nothing to do with the themes or the acting or the writing or anything like that. Like Doctor Who social the past few weeks has seemingly proffered that every character who's ever appeared in the show is going to turn out to be the Rani. I think the only person who hasn't yet been said is going to be the Rani is me. Everyone else is going to be the Rani over the next 8 weeks. So it leads me to think in the writing of the show, and particularly how RTD speaks leading into the series, during the series, when he shows up on the official podcast at the end and on his social, that he doesn't kind of fuel those flames of speculation. I mean, you tease stuff now and then. He has lent into, in terms of what he has been doing, he has lent into the hashtag, I think, Get Belinda Home. But don't get too deep into Reddit. Don't Reddit this show. Because I don't care about what might happen. I only care about what does happen. And then we can look back at it and talk about it here. Because if the story's well told, if it's well done, as has always been the case when the story's well told, what we get is more than enough and more than sufficient. What we could have got is irrelevant. It's ironically for a time travel show. How about we focus on the timeline we're in, not all the other potential ones that don't happen? It doesn't help the show if you spend weeks and weeks. This happened a bit last series. This did happen a bit. I got irritated by that. Some of that discourse last series about Mrs. Flood. And I mean, God, everyone was the fucking Rani. Like, to the point where... And the reason why I say this now is that if the Rani does show up, the general consensus, I think, will be disappointment. Because everyone's built so much up in their head over the past year and a bit, which, to be fair to the people working on the show, they've contributed or not contributed at all. They haven't fueled any flames. This is just some fans taking it among themselves. And it actually ruins the enjoyment of the show when you do this. Because you built it so much in your head that you think it has to be this thing, and when it's not exactly that thing, then you go, oh, that wasn't good. It was disappointment. It was words like let down, damp squib, anticlimactic. You'll hear that kind of shit. This is a problem in television, by the way. I'm noticing it. Even shows that aren't mystery shows. You could probably trace it back to Lust. Because week after week with Lost, you got a new question, but no answer. In the end, you inflate the balloon too much. That's something I'm just marginally concerned about. I don't want that to interrupt the stories we're going to get, and I want to judge those stories on their own merits.
It's interesting you say that, because in a way, it always felt a little bit, in hindsight, that Russell was kind of like trolling everybody who does that last year with the whole who's Ruby's mom or who are Ruby's parents. Like, he threw in all these clues and all these things, and then he was like, haha, they all turn out to be human, and everything that you were speculating about turned out to be wrong. And you're right that it kind of fueled disappointment. I mean, some of the things he threw in there honestly didn't fit in the end, and I think he kind of liked it that way. He kind of liked the idea that we had all these ideas about she was going to be a Time Lord, or she was going to be this and that, and it just turned out her parents are human and her dad's human and all of that stuff. So I always sort of felt like the whole Ruby story is not done yet, but I guess we'll see this season whether they end up going back on that or not.
It's exactly the kind of thing I hope gets avoided. You can't stop some fans coming out of all kind of nonsense. Just don't add to the nonsense.
Well, but you're also planting the seeds, like, why is it always snowing when Ruby's there and thinking about... He certainly, inside the show, planted seeds that turned out to not grow into what people thought they were going to grow into.
Which I think partly explains the reaction once the episodes were done. Because people were focusing too much on the, but you said, but you did, and no one was talking about the actual story itself. And whether you think it's a good story or a bad story, does it work? Is it aligned with the character? Does it align with the people itself? No one's talking about that. You're talking about plot and not character. And if a story works, you've got to be invested in the characters more than anything else.
As Emma said, I mean, setting up the whole mystery box thing again this season about another character is just going to lead to more of that stuff being out there, whether they intended it that way or not.
But that's potentially true. I said, you can't stop some of the fans coming up with nonsense. Just don't add to it. Have your story, tell your story. If it's good, then it should be judged on those merits. You can't stop some fans saying, but I always thought it was going to be this and it wasn't that, so now I'm pissed. It's like, all right, well, that's your problem. You shouldn't be doing is adding to it. So, yes, there is a connection between Belinda Chandra and Mundy Flynn from Boom. The connection doesn't have to be mind-blowing. It can be something actually quite basic as long as it's well executed. And as long as it fits the character we saw in Boom and the character we'll be seeing from April the 12th. Now, we have kind of already touched on this, actually, in one of our previous topics, but there were recent reports that led us to think we probably have to discuss the show's future a little bit. Now, Chris, you won't know this. Emma will already know this. We used to have a segment during the Chibnall era on this podcast called the Doomsday Clock, where we were concerned, and sometimes maybe even concerned trolled about the future of the show. We haven't done that in a while, but because of recent reports, and I think probably most people listening will be aware of them anyway, there were some stuff, Emma's already mentioned some of it. We've heard nothing that said the show's done, but there were a few little circumstantial things that led people to be concerned. Emma's already mentioned some future work Ncuti's doing, that Russell T Davies has announced. I think it's not a continuing series. I think it's just a one-off. Was it miniseries is the phrase for it? Miniseries he's doing for Channel 4. And there was one big report, but important caveat, it was in The Sun, but there was one big report basically saying that The Sky is Falling, Doctor Who is done. What I would say at this point, we have known, I think we said this in our last pod, that whether Disney will stay involved for a third series, apparently a decision was never going to be made until this series was done, until this one had aired officially, at least. Decisions may have already been made behind the scenes. We're in a void, and nothing tends to fill a void like speculation. There has been a lot of speculation. I mean, what I would say first of all is, and you both will know this better than me, is that this is not a new place for Doctor Who fans to be in, or for the show to be in. Like, if you're going to be a fan of this show, you have to then accept, you have to constantly deal with the fact that some big evil corporate hand is going to take it away from you. And that has happened once before. It probably doesn't happen as much as people think it does, because you would think if you're a Doctor Who fan that this happens every single year. But as far as we're aware, until we know more, the show's in a fairly precarious place, I'd say, right now.
Yeah. You said Doomsday Clock. I feel like we're like at 45 seconds to midnight. There's such a long gap between the series coming back and then potentially shooting a series 3. There was also a pretty well confirmed rumour that there were major reshoots happened very late in the day. So, of course, people said, oh, well, that's a regeneration then. Ncuti's going to move on in the series. I mean, I honestly feel like the next announcement that we're going to see out of Doctor Who World is Russell T Davies and or Ncuti Gatwa moving on, rather than a season 3. This is the closest I've felt it been where we were at the end of Survival, after the TV movie, all those sort of gaps where, you know, we're not cancelling it. I just feel like people just don't want to say it. No one wants to be the person to come out and say that it's done. We're just waiting for the last bit of this show to go out, and then there'll be silence. Like I've said to you, we've hitched a wagon to Disney, and I think that if there was an assumption that this is a big enough corporation that is going to be able to just pay infinitely for Who, it's got enough money. But like I said, it's not the hit factory it once was. And the fact that it was barely included in their sizzle reel, it's just another piece of IP to them. So I unfortunately feel like the Disney deal is kind of reached its natural end, and probably the next thing that's going to happen is that everyone's going to walk away. There's going to be a gap of like getting it back from Disney. And I just read an article today on the BBC News website about the making of Wolf Hall. The director of Wolf Hall, who it is,
I mean, it's Peter Kaminsky, isn't it?
Yeah, basically said that we can't afford to make prestige drama in the UK anymore. They basically had to cut all the outside scenes of Wolf Hall, and it was just ended up being having conversations in buildings because they physically couldn't afford to shoot outside. He's saying he basically took a massive pay cut, as did Mark Rylance, who played the main part in Wolf Hall, to get it onto the screen, just to get it out over the line. And he said we can't even afford to make something like Adolescence, which is obviously the new big hit on Netflix, because we can't afford the extras. So if that's the case and the Disney deal is done, then there's going to be no money for Who for a long time. This is the thing, I've never been this fan who says like the sky is falling. In the absence of other information and looking at the anecdotal evidence that's out there, I really can't think any other way right now.
One thing that is important and actually consider with Disney as well, I think I've mentioned this before, but if I haven't, not only is the issue of like Disney not being like the hit factory it once was, but the person in charge at Disney wasn't the person that did the deal for Doctor Who. Bob Chapek would have been the CEO. I don't even know how much close he would have been involved, but he would have been the guy in charge when Doctor Who signed on. And then not long after, it's on our previous podcast, we spoke about this in the previous pod. I think it might have been our Disney episode. He was essentially forced out in a very Succession-like kind of hostile takeover. And his predecessor came back and did a lot of cost-cutting measures. If you've made any kind of deal, you are more invested in trying to make it work because it's an ego thing. You want to prove that your judgment was right. Where if you come in you're less necessarily emotionally connected to it because you're like, well, I didn't bring up these contracts. I didn't sign this deal. So this isn't my project. That's another important variable, I think. And the bigger variable, and it's to piggyback what you mentioned, Emma, TV in general, and this is kind of, you mentioned like the UK, TV in general is a very volatile space right now.
Yeah.
It's incredibly volatile in terms of television production. You include, they haven't long come off a strike. A right strike where nothing was being made. The ability to get things on TV and keep them on TV in a world of streaming is an increasingly difficult thing to do. And this would be the same whether, because I tend to be a lot higher on Russell than I'm on someone like Chris Chibnall, but whether it was Russell in charge, or Chris Chibnall in charge, or Stephen Moffat in charge, the current time and environs that you're in isn't, I think, an easy one as far as television production goes. And Russell said this before, the idea of British television is kind of a bit of a misnomer. Everything is a co-production with America these days. So almost every British show, quote unquote, will end up on America. Like Wolf Hall, I think, is actually going to be, you mean the new one, most recent one, The Mirror and the Light?
Yeah. The new one, yeah.
Yeah. So that, because we had that in November, I think. October, November. The US is getting it very soon. I can't remember what channel, I can't remember what network, but it's somewhere like in the US. Like the BBC show, or we think it was the BBC show, The Gold with Jack Lowder. That show, The Gold. So that was on Paramount in the US. So the US think of it as a Paramount show because it was co-production. That's very, very common. Obviously, Adolescence is a perfect example, and it's a very timely example, where you do have to rely on an American host to get anything done. And that's the case with everything. So Doctor Who is no different. And of course, it was always going to be just a piece of IP for Disney because that's what they do. That's their business model. I remember speaking about this when we did these Doomsday Clock segments with Chibnall, that he should be in conversation with all the American streamers, because I'll come back to the point you made about Apple now. Apple lose shitloads. Amazon Prime lose shitloads, but they can afford to lose shitloads because Apple's the biggest corporation in the world and Amazon's owned by one of the richest people in the world. So for them, the phrase loss leader, these things are loss leaders. The only streamer that makes any money is Netflix, and that's only been in the past year or so. For years, Netflix lost money. We won't get to a big economic discussion, but this basically goes to the increase in interest rates. Interest rates were pretty much zero for years, and so everyone could borrow money. That's kind of how all these tech companies actually came about in the first place. And now, particularly post-pandemic, post-Russia invading Ukraine, lots of exogenous economic shocks, interest rates are now very high. So it costs a lot more to borrow money. So now these big companies are not looking to spend, they're looking where can we make savings, as our governments. Everything has been doged, for want of a better phrase. Disney are in a space that Paramount are in. I mean, Paramount are in the middle of trying to be taken over by the scion of one of the richest people in the world. Amazon can afford to lose money. Apple can afford to lose money. They're fine. Disney are in a weird space. When Bob Chapek came in, he tried to put everything on Disney Plus to get subscriptions up. Even for some of the movies, he tried to get them on Disney Plus. Like, was it Lightyear, the spin-off, the Toy Story spin-off, stuff like that. But the thing is, these movies would have made a lot of money if you should put them in cinemas. And they didn't. And that's one thing that when Chapek got fired, and why he got fired, and Bob Iger came back in, was like, I'm not missing out on all this money. Put this shit in cinemas. It takes a while for these things to grow. It did with Netflix. Not everyone signed up for Netflix straight away. It took a lot of time and a lot of losses before that happened. The streaming space in general, it is growing, but just not growing as quickly as they want. And the priority these days are profits rather than growth in terms of subscriber growth numbers and stuff. And this is all because of the stock market. This is all how the stock price is doing. And that always brings us back into where Doctor Who is. Where Doctor Who is attached to, currently at least, attached to one corporation that isn't doing terribly, but also isn't doing brilliantly. And so anything on Disney is in something of a precarious space. And also Doctor Who has a disadvantage. And this isn't a problem for me. I don't think it's a problem for any of us. But it's not a show on Disney. And excuse me, Chris, I know it's not Disney for you, but for us, it's not a show on Disney like The Bear.
Yeah.
I'm sure The Bear cost quite a bit of money. I think definitely the most recent 2 seasons. But guess what? It'll get a load of Emmys. It'll be nominated for Emmys. Like, John Oliver's show, that's Sky for us and HBO or Max in the US. Like, that show isn't very popular. It doesn't get a lot of people. But it wins Emmys every year. And John Oliver has said, if it weren't for the Emmys, we'd have been taken off by now. Because Doctor Who's not a prestige show in that way. It's not one that's probably going to be winning any awards. So therefore, it doesn't have that to partly insulate it when you're trying to justify, and it's a pity that any shows do this, but justify why it's on TV. You can say you can point to the awards. You can't point to the awards. You can point to the fan base. You can point to the legacy, but you can't point to the awards. And it's never been obviously it's a big, big merchandising and stuff, and it's usually at Comic-Con, but it's not like Star Wars in that respect, or the MCU, and it would be unfair to ever expect that. I don't think any realistic person has ever expected that. That's just unrealistic. But because it doesn't have that, it is always in an awkward space, and often we are in that meme that it's so over, we're so back. Being a Doctor Who fan is that. And we're closer to it's so over than we're so back. Who knows? In a few weeks, we might be back to we're so back. I'd love to be in that place.
Some of the problem with me is, because season 1, I think, put your hand on your heart, you can only really call it mid.
Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't shit.
I think
it was okay.
The problem is, you can't just do okay.
I mean, you touched on something actually quite telling, that generally so much, and I think this is partly because of conversation so much more acidic and so much sharper now, that things can't be okay. Like, it's very much, you and I are both sports fans, and we've both encountered this in sports talk discourse. So players are either like world class or they're frauds. A manager's either a genius or he's a simpleton, and no one can just be good at their job. They talk about this in the movie quite a lot. Like, the middle has been kind of hollowed out quite a lot. In a way, Doctor Who, and Russell himself, in terms of the TV he likes to write, his sensibilities, the TV he likes to watch, is in a way that middle. I don't mean that to damn it with faint praise or anything, but like, we're not trying to change your life with the show, but we do think there is value and worth sitting down and being entertained for like 45, 50 minutes. And talking about, even in Fantastical World of Doctor Who, talking about kind of everyday issues. That is kind of what Russell that's his wheelhouse, that's where he lives, and that's what the people who generally like his stuff like. So there's a much bigger macro problem, I think, rather than whatever happens with the future of the show. With just Doctor Who, and I think a lot of the TV that we all probably like to watch. While I didn't want to get into a whole, because first, we don't know. I think it was important to discuss it because we would kind of be being negligent if we didn't speak about it at all, if we're, previewing a new series. Sorry, Chris, anything you wanted to add on that? Because you haven't said much yet.
Part of the issue is that arguably we're past the idea that we're in the era of peak TV,
Yes, well past that.
We're still producing a lot of shows, and people have to make choices. So there's only so many hours in the day that you can sit down and watch TV and still have a reasonable life outside of that. And obviously some of us spend more time watching it than others do. But Doctor Who is competing with all of that. And as you said, if you're only making sort of a mid-level series, people are going to wonder whether they should be spending their time watching it or whether they should move on to something else. When your first episode of the season is Space Babies, which is kind of a weird, childish way to start your show. And I'm not saying I didn't like the episode, but it was weird tonally for people who were just tuning in on Disney Plus, and they're like, what the fuck is this? So people have to make choices, and there's still a lot out there that you're competing against, whether it's directly or indirectly, but you're always competing with people's time. Do you want to spend time watching Severance and thinking about that show? Or do you want to think about watching Doctor Who? You might not have room in your life for both. Even if Disney drops Doctor Who after this season, on the one hand, I would like to think that there would be another streaming service that would step up and want to stream the show. But on the other hand, they're probably not going to get the same amount of money. They're probably going to get a lower amount of money from a different streaming service than they're getting from Disney. And how does that affect the quality of the show? How do you have something, at least from the trailer, as innovative as Mr. Ring-a-Ding, the cartoon guy who comes to life and comes out on the screen and all that stuff? How do you do that, on less money? You really have to scale down what you're doing in order to have a show like that with less money. Maybe you end up going back to the John Pertwee era years where they cut down on the budget by having the Doctor stranded on Earth, and then they didn't have to make other planets or spaceships or, zoomy stuff in space. They just kind of toned it down and saved money that way. It was a way to save the show at the time. Maybe that's the future for the show here in order to save money if the Disney thing falls through. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. As you say, it's very clear that we're not going to have a Doctor Who next year. I mean, the soonest that you can have Doctor Who next year would probably be like next fall. And that's if they started it like right after this season ends in a couple of months. So even then, it's kind of dicey. That's why I kind of thought maybe the spin-off show, The War Between the Land and the Sea, is meant to be the Doctor Who offering like next year. And then that would give them a year to come up with another season of Doctor Who. Like, I don't know if that's what they're thinking or not, but that might be the thinking there.
I do understand Russell spoken about this, that if they were given the all clear to go into production, episodes are kind of written. But and I do agree with you that, like, I don't think we get anything this New Year's or Christmas, and a full series I think is increasingly unlikely, unless you did something like Tenants last year where it was just specials, like you even do a couple of episodes or whatever. Another thing to piggyback, you are right. Talking about the state of television, its own podcast, but the kind of silver lining of that is that it is more common that if a show gets dropped at one place, there's homes to find elsewhere. I don't know if it's the case in America, Chris, but Emma, for us, if a show got taken off the TV, and that was it. It wasn't going to go somewhere else. It is now, it's not uncommon for that to happen now. Like, it doesn't mean it happens all the time, it doesn't, but it is uncommon that it could find distribution, essentially, elsewhere. And I agree with the point you made, Chris, about like what they did with John Pertwee. We need to save money. Let's just do it on Earth. If there's any show ever that is well placed to deal with upheaval like that, it is Doctor Who. Like Moffat recently, not that long ago, said back to Joy to the World, what they did with Steph Diwali. We spoke about this on our Joy to the World episode, so go back and listen if you've missed it. He said that inclusion that was very popular and worked very well was the result, he said, as always is with Doctor Who, a budget cut. Almost all the best things in Doctor Who generally come when the budget's been cut. If any show is equipped to deal with this upheaval, it is this show, because it's done it many times before. In some ways, that's its love language, dealing with stuff being taken away from it and then still finding a way to survive. Just moving off that, if we just finish up, I'll come to you first. Is there any additional observations for just stuff for this new series that we haven't mentioned yet?
Just looking at the episode titles and sort of looking at the structure, I wonder how it's going to be structured. Is it looking like maybe another ending two-parter again, and whether it's going to drop two at how it's going to come out? They're going to drop two at the beginning, two at the end again, or going to be one every week again? I've altered the start time slightly now.
Oh, good point. Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, because so it'll be dropping 8 a.m. UK time now rather than midnight. So it's a little bit less dodgy spoilers, but still able to watch it kind of soon as, if you see. So,
ironically, it's much better for you than for me. You are forced to be up at that time on Saturday.
I'm generally awake at the moment. I'll be awake 7 hours before that time. Yeah.
So you have no choice but to be awake for it, when I'm like, oh, I got to get up that early on a weekend.
I'll just persuading somebody that we're not watching Paw Patrol on the big telly now, we're watching Doctor Who. But mind you, though, she quite likes she enjoys watching Doctor Who, so she actually asked to watch it the other day. Yeah, it's going to be interesting what sort of difference that makes to viewing numbers, and we're not privy to iPlayer numbers, but if it moves the needle anything on viewing figures at all. And I'm just interested to see what happens with the promotion. I think that my kind of feeling on the pulse of the show and how it's going is going to be formed in the next week or two.
It's interesting for those listening to this, because they will have their own opinions, potentially, based on what they've seen. And they may be like, what the fuck are we chatting about? And it's like, well, look, we didn't have it when we were speaking, when we had this conversation. The good point about the start time, I'd forgotten to put that in my notes, but like, this didn't matter to me. I remember speaking about this a year ago. But there is kind of a feeling of, over here, of, yay, we get it before everyone else. Fuck you, rest of the world. I don't give a shit, really. But because before, obviously we could watch at the same time as everyone, but there was a feeling of we were going to America and we were giving it to America first. And understandably, some people can't stay up till that time. But because we actually technically do get it now before the rest of the world, and when I say the rest of the world, specifically America, because some people seem to be so America-pilled and that's nothing to do with your current government, there's just a feeling of, yes, this is as it should be. It's incidental to me. I really couldn't care less either way. And we're all getting it around the same time.
According to Josh Snares, it's most convenient for people who live on the Gold Coast of Australia.
Yes, it is. It's actually great for Australians. It's true. It works better for Australia and I guess New Zealand than anywhere else in the world. Their time has finally come. Chris, is there anything else you need to add?
If this is really the last season of Doctor Who for a while. I mean, Emma and I have both been around for a while.
Yeah, you two know what this is like.
I try to keep it in perspective. The classic series was on for 26 years. The new show's been on for 20 years. I mean, if it needs to take a rest again, it's not ideal, but it'll be back. I always say Doctor Who is the best format ever devised for TV. You can go anywhere, you can do anything, you can replace the entire cast every few years, and there's a valid story reason behind that. It adapts to new storytelling styles and makes some of its own along the way. As the Doctor says in Ark in Space, it's indomitable. You know, it's indomitable. It's always going to be there, even if it goes away again for a while. Just like when you had kids who were watching the original series and they grew up to be Russell T. Davies and Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall. There are kids who watched over the last 20 years who were going to come of age in the TV world, and they're going to want to have their own Doctor Who that they make. And it might take a while, but it's going to happen. I try to keep that hope alive, you know, that maybe the circumstances aren't right now for a series after this. Maybe they are. I would love Ncuti to stick around, but if it has to go off for a while, it'll still be there, and it'll come back. I guarantee it'll come back.
Yeah, it's just too good an idea, and it's too flexible as well. You can make movies out of it, you can do series, you can do specials. It would break my heart a bit if it went away again and for years. But, you know, we're used to the slow path. We can wait. It will come around again. It's just too good an idea to completely die. It always, and like I say, there's enough fans and enough ground support for it. Although small, that it always keep going. There's always Big Finish. There's always people writing books. There's always podcasts and YouTube, and it's always going to be there somewhere. It's not like a lot of these other genre shows that I think people are coming around to now again, but hasn't quite got the momentum to get a new series going. Like things like the X-Files, for example, things that were massive when I was young. It's being rediscovered by sort of young Gen Z people now, and like you see memes about it on TikTok and things like that. So people are watching it, and people keep grumbling about remaking things like that, but it never quite gets it hasn't quite got the momentum to behind it, because it hasn't got that sort of nucleus of people making fan stuff, those people who cut their teeth making this stuff, learning how to be good, learning how to be right, learning how to act on it, and then they become the fans who become professionals, who then become the people who make stuff, other stuff, who get big enough, then have the energy and the clout to make the show that they're passionate about. It has just happened with Doctor Who. If it has to go through that cycle again, I think there's more than enough people out there who are passionate about it, who are making their own stuff, YouTube, on TikTok, on podcasts, on all those things, who will become professionals, who will come in after people like Russell T. So it might take a long time, but it will come back round again. But, you know, like you say, it's not ideal, but I think if it has to take a rest, then it has to take a rest.
Doctor Who will always exist, and it's always a reason to believe in Doctor Who while there are still people who care about it. And there are still a lot of people who do care about the show. Maybe not as much as, like, Star Wars, but still a lot of people who do care about the show, as is what happened in 2005. If you have enough people who care about the show, and the show itself in some form is always going to exist. Only couple of things I just want to point out we haven't mentioned yet. As a social point, this is the first all-melanin TARDIS. The first TARDIS that, for some of it at least, will not have any white people in it. And I know Varda said to mention that. I think she said very early on when she was on set, she and Ncuti had a conversation about that. Just about that. Like, wow, like, this is the first time. That on its own is nothing to do, I think, with quality of storytelling, but it is notable, and I think definitely deserves mentioning. I mean, it'll be interesting to see and apparently her name is pronounced Varda, not Varada or Varda. She's going to be in 2 big shows around the same time, because season 2 of Andor drops, I think, the same day.
It does, yeah.
I think 12th of April. I think it's the same day, even though that's actually going to be done in 3 weeks for some reason. They're doing 3 episode drops each week. So it'll also be interesting to see what feedback she gets online and what it's for. I also think her Instagram in general will be interesting to see if the red tops and the tabloids are combing that. Just because she'll promote her stuff, but she, let's just say, very, very active about causes she cares about on there. And it's one of them ones that doesn't bother me, because probably I agree with most of what she cares about. But it's the kind of thing that you can imagine if newspapers are so inclined, which they sometimes are, and radio phone and stuff, to start combing through her Instagram and using that to try and create negative headlines. And the other thing is, a year ago, when we looked at the writers and just in terms of the writers and directors for the show a year ago, Russell wrote a lot, too much, and it was, I'm trying to remember all the writers now. Russell wrote 6? Stephen Moffat wrote 1, and then Rogue, Ronnie Redmond and Kate Herron wrote Rogue, and so it was like 2 women on 1 episode and all white people. And Russell did address this and said, because he was just trying to get everything together, he was kind of went with what he knew to an extent, but he did want to broaden things in terms of gender and gender identity and race for season 2. And let's be fair to him, he has delivered on that. Because if you do look at the day after the day before we're recording, the episode titles have dropped. We know who's writing, we know who's directing, and there is a mix. Russell's has written 4, and he's co-written 1. But if you look at the writing stuff this time, the Interstellar Song Contest is written by Juno Dawson. I think she's the first transgender writer ever on the show, or at least out transgender writer on this show. There are 2 black writers on this series on separate episodes. That's new. And McCallum McPherson is also, that's episode, which I think is episode 5, Destroying the Engine. I'm looking forward to that one in particular. It's written by Inoa Ellams, who's known as a poet. He's also a friend of a friend. So I knew about this before some other people did. So he's written this episode directed by Karen McPherson, who's a black woman, and she actually doesn't have a lot of experience directing. This does feel like, I'm sure she's earned it, of course, but this is Russell really trying to give someone an opportunity, because you've got that on your resume and your CV forever. And even with the directors, Amanda Brocci is directing 2 episodes. Already mentioned McCallum McPherson, and then what we believe is the 2-part finale is directed by a South Asian man. So there is a good mix of, when we're talking about sexuality, gender identity, race, gender itself, you're getting different voices and some new voices. I think that was one of the things, it didn't bother me as much, but some people complain that there's no new voices in the last series. Well, you're getting new voices in this one. I think there is something more of a mix. So I don't think that complaint will be fair this time around. And just to finish up, I got an email recently from an organisation called FeedSpot. They did a list recently of like top Doctor Who podcasts. We are on it. So I'll say take FeedSpot's advice. And if you're new here, please subscribe. And if you have any thoughts on what we've just spoken about, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com, analysing spelled with an S. And then we are across some, but not all social media, at Analysing DW. Okay, Chris, Emma, thank you for both being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
And thank you for listening. And we will be back after April the 12th to analyse the robot revolution. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.